A pack could forgive hunger, defeat, even cowardice disguised as caution, but it rarely forgave a woman who had been named unlucky. Misfortune was treated like a scent that spread, clinging to wool, to skin, to shared bowls and whispered alliances. Celeste Frostborn had learned that truth in the months since the High Luna's loss, when witnesses swore she had handed over the wrong tonic and the council carved blame into her name before dawn. Guilt had become simpler than inquiry. In a hard winter, simplicity felt like justice to people too frightened to ask better questions. By first light, iron rang against iron across the winter trials arena, as if the mountain itself were being forged awake. Celeste stood in the servants' line below the western stands, wrists chafed raw under braided restraint cord, healer satchel hanging from one shoulder like a mockery of rank. Condemned mercy healer, the decree had called her. She would not compete, not be judged for strength or speed. She would earn delay, stitch the torn, set the broken, keep wolves breathing between rounds until the council decided whether she deserved another sunrise. Snow needled through the open slats above the Undercroft corridor and melted down the back of her neck. Her fingers were white at the tips, then red. The skin split where the cold had bitten too many nights in a stone cell. Someone had taken her gloves 3 days ago. Someone else had laughed when she asked for them back. A guard shoved her forward with the butt of his spear. "Keep moving, Frostwitch. Fighters bleed faster than you walk." She stumbled, regained her balance, and kept her eyes lowered. Looking directly at high-ranking wolves could be called defiance now. Almost anything could, if the right mouth said it loudly enough. At the Brazier checkpoint, two senior pack women in fur-lined gray looked her over with open contempt. One of them, Veda of the Inner Kennels, clicked her tongue as Celeste passed. "Do not let her near the birthing huts," Veda said to no one and everyone. "I do not care what title they pin on her." The second woman gave a thin smile. They should have buried her with the old season. Laughter moved through the line behind Celeste, quick and mean, gone before she could decide whether it hurt more when strangers joined in. She swallowed and kept walking. The arena opened before her in a burst of white glare and black stone. Tiered stands curved around an ice-packed ring scored with old claw marks. Banner poles snapped in the wind, each flag heavy with frozen fringe. Torches burned blue in iron brackets, smoke bending low and flat as the storm gathered over the ridge. This was no ceremonial display ground today. It was a proving machine. Fighters warmed near the southern gate, rolling shoulders under leather, shifting half-form so claws could grip the slick ground. Every breath rose in clouds. Every eye tracked hierarchy. She was assigned to Infirmary Station 3, a canvas lean-to anchored with chains beside the second sparring lane. A boy barely into adulthood, face bruised from a training tumble, sat on a stool waiting for his shoulder wrap. His gaze snagged on her branded wrist and he jerked away. "I will wait for another healer," he said. "You can wait," said the quartermaster without looking up from his slate. "Or you can keep your arm." The boy hesitated, shame and fear crossing his face in a raw, transparent mix. He sat back down, rigid as carved wood. Celeste cleaned the scrape with thawed spirits, wound linen, and tied the knot one-handed when her right thumb cramped. She did not speak. Neither did he. When she finished, he stood too quickly and almost tipped the stool. Behind her, 3 fighters muttered near the weapon rack. "Did you hear they chained her at night? They should have done worse." She touched the Luna. "That is enough." Each word landed with the dull force of a hammer on old bruise. The truth she had repeated for months rose again, useless and burning. The vial had been switched. The stopper wax had been wrong. The scent carried moonroot ash under bitter leaf, not the tonic she had brewed. She had set it to the tribunal until her throat bled, and still they wrote down only the part that made conviction easy. A hand clamped on the back of her neck. Not hard enough to injure, hard enough to remind. Captain Rorik, commander of trial logistics, leaned close so his breath fogged against her ear. You will report to the lower stores after second horn. Alone. She stiffened. My assignment is here through fourth horn. His fingers tightened. Your assignment is where I decide, unless you prefer we return you to your cell before noon and skip this little charity. When he released her, she stood very still until the tremor in her knees eased. The lower stores sat beneath the east stand, a maze of stacked crates, dried herbs, lamp oil, old harness straps, and damp stone that trapped cold like a grudge. She arrived at second horn with her satchel clutched to her ribs. Rorik waited inside with a cloaked man she did not recognize, broad-shouldered, wolf-scent masked under smoke resin. On the crate between them sat a familiar ceramic vial marked with the infirmary seal. The cloaked man turned at once, as if admiring craft. You understand what this buys us. Rorik grunted. I understand outcomes. The March Alpha arrives under truce by dusk. We need instability before council vote. Panic loosens loyalties. Celeste's pulse slammed against her throat. She knew that vial shape. She knew the tiny chip near the neck where her thumbnail had struck during the Luna hearing. It had been logged as evidence. It should have been locked in Moonwell custody, not resting on a dusty crate in a supply cellar. She stepped back, boots scraping stone. Both men turned. Rorik's expression did not change. You were not called to hide in the doorway. Come in. She did not move. The cloaked man studied her with cool interest. This is the healer. This is the problem, Rorik corrected. Celeste found her voice by force. That vial was council evidence. Council property, Rorik said. Moved where needed. What are you planning? His smile held no humor. You are planning remorse. Publicly. At the final assembly. You will confess negligence in the Luna case and accept sentence. In exchange, your death will be clean and quick. She stared at him, unable to process the shape of his calm. The cloaked man set the vial down with care. If she refuses? Rorik shrugged. Then another patient fails in her care tonight, and we discover she hid contraband compounds in her satchel. Witnesses will confirm. They always do. Cold climbed her spine in a sharp metallic wave. This is the same game. Different board, same hand. Stay quiet, and they write your silence as guilt. Speak, and they call it panic. Kneel, and they call it repentance. Stand, and they call it treason. The words moved through her mind in present tense, immediate and bright, each one a rung on a ladder she had refused to see. If she obeys, she dies neatly. If she fights alone, she dies loudly. If she runs, at least the story breaks shape. At least she chooses one thing before they choose all of it for her. Rorik took one step toward her. Give me your satchel. She backed into the corridor mouth. Now. When she turned and ran, his oath cracked against the stone like a whip. She flew through narrow service passages where frozen runoff turned the floor into glass. Twice she hit the wall with her shoulder to keep from falling. Torches blurred. Voices rose behind her, boots pounding, orders ricocheting through the undercroft. At the stairwell she veered left, ducked under a hanging chain, and burst into the arena light so suddenly her eyes watered. The storm had thickened. Snow drove nearly sideways across the ring. Third horn sounded deep and carrying, and every head in the lower stands turned toward the central gate where commanders assembled for opening declarations. She should have gone to the outer kennels, found a breach in the palisade, vanished into tree line until night. That was the rational path. Instead, she found herself crossing the edge of the main ring, boots sliding on packed ice, because guards were already closing from both flanks, and the only open space left was the one no condemned woman was meant to enter. A hush moved outward in concentric shock as people recognized her. Back to your station, someone shouted. Chain her. Traitor! Rorik broke from the east tunnel, face dark with fury. Seize her. by trial authority. She spun, searching for any gap, any ladder, any mercy not yet spoken for. Then the reigning trial commander stepped down from the Blackstone dais. Brennan Stormborn was taller than rumor, scars pale and bright against weather-browned skin, heavy cloak snapping behind him in the wind like a war flag. He wore no crown, only the iron torque of command and the silence of a wolf accustomed to being obeyed before he raised his voice. Until that moment, she had never heard him speak directly to her. She had assumed, as everyone did, that powerful men preserved distance from the condemned. He walked into the ring, straight toward her. The snow seemed to hold its breath. "Celeste Frostborn," he said, the words carrying to the highest tier without a shout. "Stand beside me." The arena went still enough that torchfire hissed loud as rain. She did not understand. Her body moved anyway, one unsteady step, then another, until she stood within his shadow and the storm scent of cedar, iron, and lightning wrapped around her like a struck bell. Rorik stopped 10 paces away. "Commander, she is under disciplinary hold." Brennan did not look at him. He reached for Celeste's hand, palm up, and his thumb brushed the cracked healer marks at her wrist. Heat rushed through her ribs so abruptly she swayed. Every nerve lit. Instinct sharpened to a blade-edge awareness. The world narrowed to breath, scent, skin. His pupils shifted, predator rising just beneath human control, and amber blood molten through his irises. Across the ring, dominant wolves who feared no rival lowered their gaze without seeming to choose it. Brennan's breath caught once. He closed his hand around hers with measured care, then released her slowly, as if forcing himself to let go in front of 1,000 watching eyes. When he finally turned toward the command dais, his voice dropped, meant only for her, a vow hidden inside the storm. "You are not the crime they branded onto you." The words struck her harder than any blow she had taken in the cellars. Not the promise itself, but the fact that he had said it where everyone could hear him breathe. Celeste stood with her hand still warm from his, stunned by the brutal clarity of being seen and afraid of what that visibility would cost. Rorik recovered first. "Commander, with respect." She fled lawful questioning and entered the ring without leave. She was ordered to surrender contraband. Brennan turned then, and the movement was small, almost indifferent, yet half the nearest guards straightened as if pulled upright by wire. "Contraband. A satchel with unregistered compounds. Search her." Brennan lifted one hand, palm open toward the quartermaster. "Now," in front of the council tier. A hush spread again. Public procedure meant public risk. Rorik hesitated long enough for the hesitation to become its own accusation, then snapped his fingers at 2 wardens. They approached Celeste with visible reluctance, opened her satchel on a shield laid flat over the ice, and emptied every pouch into the snow. Stitch needles, bitter leaf salve, linen wraps, dried willow bark, 1 flint striker with no spark left in it, and a cracked cup. No toxin, no hidden powder, no confession. Brennan did not raise his voice. "Captain Rorik, you made a claim before witnesses. If you repeat it, you will produce proof this instant. If you cannot, you will return to your post and remember that trial authority is delegated, not inherited." Rorik's jaw worked once. As commanded. He backed away, each step rigid with swallowed rage, then disappeared into the eastern lane. Celeste watched him go with the sick certainty that men like him did not forget humiliation. They sharpened it. Brennan signaled to the closest standard bearer. "Resume opening declarations. Frostborn remains under my direct charge." The ring exhaled at last into noise, not relief, but movement. The practical clatter of an institution deciding how to absorb a disruption. Fighters were called, horns answered, torches spat in the wind. Yet the current around her had altered. Wolves who had spat at her hours ago now looked and looked away. uncertain which rule would keep them safest. Brennan leaned close enough that only she could hear. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her knees trembled. "Do not force strength for me," he said. "I asked a plain question." "Yes," she managed. "I can walk." "Good. Stay at my left." He did not grip her or display her. He simply moved, expecting her to match his pace, and the strange courtesy of that nearly undid her. They crossed behind the command dais toward the north corridor where the stone narrowed and the wind dropped. Two stormborn sentries fell in behind them, both broad, both silent, both wearing the same iron wolf sigil at the throat. Not one touched their weapon while she passed. By the time they reached the king's wing, exhaustion had sunk its claws into her spine. The passage here was different from the public undercroft. Cleaner stone, lamps shielded against drafts, no shouting, no gambling dice rattling over barrels. Discipline had a scent, she realized suddenly: oil and wool and fresh-cut cedar over steel. A territory within territory. His. The antechamber opened into a long room lined with maps pinned by bone pegs, weather reports carved on slate, and a central brazier that gave steady heat rather than the violent flare of arena torches. 3 officers looked up as Brennan entered. One was a woman with silver-threaded braids and a scar crossing the bridge of her nose. Another was a young male scribe whose ink-stained fingers froze above a ledger. The third, an older wolf in chainmail, narrowed his eyes at Celeste and said nothing. "Commander Hale," Brennan said to the scarred woman, "this is Celeste Frostborn. She is to be provisioned and guarded. No one enters her quarters without my order or hers." Hale held Celeste's gaze for a measured beat, assessing, not kind and not cruel. "Understood." The older wolf shifted. "My king, with border envoys due by dusk, housing a branded suspect in the war wing is a provocation." Brennan glanced at him, then let it provoke clarity. If any wolf objects, he can object to me directly in the ring. The older wolf bowed his head at once. "As you command." Celeste caught the title like a blade catching light. "My king, not commander, not trial marshal." The rumor she had dismissed as fear-drunk nonsense hardened into fact in front of her. Brennan Stormborn was not merely running the winter trials. He was the sovereign line in living flesh. She followed Hale down a side hall to a small chamber with a narrow cot, wool blankets, a basin of warm water, and a shuttered window looking onto the inner yard where armed wolves drilled in the sleet. It was more comfort than her cell had offered in months. It felt almost dangerous to step inside. Hale set a folded cloak on the cot. "Eat when food comes, sleep if you can. Someone will stand outside the door." Celeste rubbed the restraint marks on her wrists. "You do not trust me." Hale's mouth tilted, not quite a smile. "Trust is earned. Protection can be ordered. For now, the order stands." When she left, the door clicked shut with soft finality. Celeste stood in the middle of the room and shook from cold, then from delayed terror, then from a rising disbelief that would not settle into any single emotion long enough to name. I am still breathing. I am in his hall. Men who would have chained me this morning lowered their heads and moved aside. This should feel like safety, but safety has always come with terms written in someone else's hand. If he changes his mind, the floor opens again. If he does not, every enemy he has becomes mine. I do not know which fear to hold first. I do not know how to carry relief without dropping it. Yet when he spoke my name in the ring, the numb knot behind my ribs loosened for one dangerous heartbeat, and I wanted that heartbeat back. A knock sounded. Not hard. Once. She opened the door to find Brennan alone, steam rising from a wooden tray he carried himself, broth, dark bread, and a cup of pine needle tea. No servant followed. No witness lingered in the hall. "You should not serve me," she said, the old reflex immediate. "I am not serving you." He stepped inside and set the tray on the table by the window. I am making sure you eat before you fall over. The bluntness startled a strained laugh out of her, thin and brief. That is almost kindness. It is logistics, he said, and one corner of his mouth moved as if humor had tried to surface and been restrained. Kindness can be discussed later. He turned toward her then and noticed, truly noticed, the whitened cracks across her fingertips, the swelling at her knuckles, the way she flexed and failed to close her right hand fully. His expression sharpened. May I examine your hands? The question settled between them like a test she had never been offered before. Consent asked, not assumed. Celeste nodded. He held out his palms and waited until she placed hers there. The contact landed like stepping from frozen stone into deep water warmed by hidden springs. Heat flooded up her arms and across her chest in a rushing wave that stole her breath. Instinct leapt awake, fierce and bewildered. Every scent in the room brightened to painful detail. Cedar smoke caught in his cloak, iron from the torque at his throat, storm ozone clinging to skin that had stood under open sky too long. Brennan went very still. His head tipped slightly as though he were listening to a distant drum only he could hear. Then his inhale cut sharp, controlled, but unmistakable. Amber overtook his irises, brightening toward molten gold at the edges. The pressure in the room changed. Not wind, not sound. Presence. Ancient and territorial and vast enough that the guards outside shifted their weight in unison. Celeste felt it move through her bones and answer from somewhere equally old beneath her fear. His thumb traced the healer sigil burned faintly into her wrist. Who did this binding? Tribunal clerk, she whispered. After sentencing. For punishment? For record-keeping, they said. His jaw tightened. He lifted her right hand to the light, frowned at the split skin, then looked back at her with that same feral gold gaze, less controlled now, less distant. You treated half this arena in sub-zero wind without gloves. They took them. Who? I do not know. She swallowed. Many people wanted to be seen doing it. Silence gathered, charged and close. He did not release her. She did not pull away. Their locked stare stretched until it felt like standing at the lip of a cliff in darkness, aware that one more step changed the map forever. Brennan's voice roughened. Do you feel this? Yes. Tell me what? She could have lied. Survival had taught her to soften truth into harmless shapes. But his hands were steady around hers, and for the first time since the tribunal she wanted one person to hear the full blade of it. It feels like being dragged toward fire after months in snow, she said. Like every part of me that went quiet is suddenly loud. It is terrifying. His throat moved with a swallow. Good. It terrifies me too. The admission landed with almost sacred force. An Alpha King did not confess fear to a condemned healer. Not unless the fear mattered more than image. She forced herself to keep speaking while she still had courage. Rorik lied about my satchel because he needed me contained. I heard him in the lower stores with a cloaked man. They had evidence from the Luna case, the vial with the chipped neck. He told me to confess publicly at final assembly. Said if I refused, another patient would die and witnesses would confirm I poisoned them. Brennan's expression emptied into pure command. You are certain of the vial. I would know it blind. Her voice shook now, anger and old grief threading together. It should be in Moonwell custody. If it is in circulation, they plan to use it again. He released one hand only to reach for the bell rope by the door. Hale entered at once. Lock down lower stores and evidence vault routes, Brennan said. Quietly. No public alarm. Detain Rorik if he resists search authority. Send 2 trackers to shadow every border envoy from gate to guest hall, and I want names before nightfall. Hale's gaze flicked to Celeste's hand still held in his. Understanding sharpened her face, then was buried. At once, my king. When the door shut again, Brennan exhaled slowly, as if choosing each next word against the weight of 10 possible outcomes. You were framed once because procedure favored silence over truth. That ends now. A horn sounded from the outer yard, long and low. Arrival signal. Brennan moved to the window, still holding her left hand, and pushed the shutter open with his free one. In the drifting white below, a column of riders passed through the north gate under truce banners stitched in black and silver. At their center rode a man in a wolf pelt mantle, posture easy, smile visible even at distance. Celeste recognized him from council sketches and whispered the name before she meant to. Xavier Duskwalker. Brennan's gaze stayed on the yard, his grip tightening once around her fingers, not painful, anchoring. Gold still burned at the core of his eyes when he looked back at her. Then the game begins in my house, he said. And this time, you will not stand alone. Celeste held his gaze as the riders crossed the yard below, and for one suspended beat she believed she might actually survive the night, long enough to fear tomorrow. Then the discipline bell rang from the south tower, sharp and insistent, and the wing around them shifted into motion. Brennan closed the shutter, released her hand only long enough to fasten his cloak, and opened the chamber door. Stay with Hale until I send for you. I am assigned to the ring. You are assigned where I can keep you breathing. Hale appeared in the corridor with 2 sentries already at her back. Brennan gave 3 clipped orders about route locks and escort rotations, then looked at Celeste once more. Not as commander to subordinate, but as one person trying to memorize another in a room full of threats. Eat now. There will be no easy hour after this. He was gone before she found an answer. The broth had cooled by the time she forced it down. Outside her door, boots crossed and recrossed stone in measured patterns, watch turns precise enough to mark minutes without a clock. She washed her hands in the basin until the water pinked from split skin, wrapped her fingers in narrow linen, and sat on the edge of the cot trying to slow the tremor in her chest. I have spent months learning to make myself small, quiet, useful, forgettable. That was the only shape that kept pain predictable. Now he keeps pulling me into open ground and calling it protection, and every instinct I own says open ground is where wolves die. Trust is not a feeling. Trust is risk with memory attached. If I place even one honest weight on him and he lets go, there will be nothing left of me that can stand back up. Yet when he asked permission before touching my hands, the world tilted in a way I cannot untangle. I am still afraid. I am also listening. A hard knock sounded at last. Not Brennan this time. Hale stepped in, snow dusting her braids. Endurance stage moved early, she said. Blizzard front accelerated. We have 30 fighters rotating through 3 lanes, and Station 2 lost its surgeon to a shoulder dislocation. The commander wants you on ice with him. Celeste rose immediately, satchel already over her shoulder. With him. With his direct guard. Hale studied her face, then added, that means no one gets to reroute you in a corridor. Move. They crossed the arena under a sky that had turned the color of forged steel. Wind came in long, punishing gusts that flattened breath and drove powder snow through seams in cloak and boots. The stands were still crowded despite the weather, wolves wrapped in furs, banners snapping like whips above them. In the center ring, teams ran weighted circuits across an ice trench while judges marked collapse times on slate. Brennan stood at the boundary line with no hood, sleet freezing in his hair. His officers clustered behind him around map boards weighted with daggers. When she approached, his posture eased by a fraction. Station 3 is yours, he said. All severe tiers route to you first. If anything feels wrong with a patient, you stop treatment and call me. You cannot leave command for every stitch. Watch me. The corner of Hale's mouth twitched despite the storm. The first hour blurred into triage rhythm. Dislocated thumbs reset against gritted teeth, split brows, one cracked rib taped hard enough to breathe, then a deep lateral tear along a scout's flank, after he slipped against an ice barrier and caught protruding rebar meant to test agility. He was broad through the shoulders and shaking from cold, blood soaking the edge of his training leather. "Hold him down," Celeste ordered, dropping to both knees in snow already stained and slushy near the lane markers. "If he jerks, he will rip wider." Two guards pinned the fighter's arms. Celeste irrigated the wound, checked depth, reached for her suture needle, and realized too late that her fingers no longer obeyed. Numbness had climbed from fingertips to wrist. The needle slipped, bounced off her gloveless knuckle, vanished into the churned snow. She swore under her breath and reached for another. That one shook in her grasp so badly the thread would not pass. "I can finish," said the wounded scout, voice ragged with pain. "Just pack it and send me." "You bleed out in 10 minutes if I pack and send." Another gust slammed through the lane, and her right hand simply stopped closing. Panic hit in a flat, cold wave. Not now. Not in front of all of them. A shadow fell over her shoulder as Brennan knelt beside her in the snow. His cloak spread around both of them, a wall against wind. He did not touch her immediately. He held her gaze first. "May I," he asked quietly, "warm your hands?" The question was so unexpected she stared at him, mind blank for half a beat, while the crowd noise dulled to static. A king on one knee in slush, asking permission from a condemned healer while commanders and rivals watched from the stands. She nodded once. He took her rigid hands between his palms and tucked them inside the inner fold of his cloak against the heat of his chest, shielding them from sleet with his body. His skin radiated steady warmth through linen wraps and cracked knuckles. Not possessive, not performative, practical, focused care, as if this were the most ordinary command decision in the world. The scout hissed and tried to twist. Celeste forced her attention back to the wound. "Pressure higher. No, higher. At the upper edge." Brennan kept her hands covered until sensation began to return in painful pins and sparks. "Can you sew?" "Yes." "Then I steady. You lead." He withdrew one hand only to brace her wrist at the exact angle she needed, firm enough to cancel tremor, light enough to leave full control in her fingers. She drove the needle through skin, pulled thread, tied, repeated. Snow gathered on Brennan's shoulders in white bands. He did not move. Around them, judges paused mid-call. Fighters slowed on the trench line to watch. Every hierarchy in the arena witnessed who he trusted with a wolf's life. By the time she finished the final knot, the scout's breathing had steadied and the bleeding was controlled. Celeste sealed the line with salve and sat back on her heels, lungs burning. Brennan released her wrist and rose in one smooth motion, then offered his hand to help her stand. She accepted before pride could argue. Near the command rail, one of the senior council males spoke too loudly to be accidental. "Your Majesty diminishes the throne by kneeling in snow for a branded female." Brennan turned his head, voice carrying clean across the lane. "A throne that cannot kneel to preserve life deserves to collapse." He looked back to Celeste as if no one else had spoken. "Drink water, 5 minutes." He moved off to call stage rotations, leaving silence in his wake like a struck bell. Celeste drank from a canteen with shaking hands and tried to process what had happened. She had expected claim, leverage, maybe tenderness sharpened into debt. Instead, he had offered structure, consent, support, trust, visible enough to alter pack behavior in real time. The distinction was non-trivial, and her body understood it before her mind could. The blizzard intensified toward dusk. Runners lit extra braziers along the outer paths, and ice glazed over every exposed rail in a thin, treacherous sheen. By the time fourth horn sounded, Celeste's shoulders ached from bracing wounded weight, and her bandage supply was nearly gone. Hale rotated her off lane duty with a curt nod and steered her toward the ration fires behind the northern stands. Eat while it is hot, Hale said. You have 10 minutes before debrief. The ration yard was a rough triangle of packed snow ringed by storage wagons. Wolves queued with tin bowls for stew thick with barley and venison. Smoke hung low, carrying grease, wood, wet wool, and exhaustion. Celeste moved to the edge of the nearest fire, keeping her back to a wagon wheel the way prisoners learn to do, and wrapped both hands around her bowl for heat. She had taken 3 swallows when Veda of the inner kennels stepped into her space with 2 senior females and a broad-shouldered male from the breeding ward. Their expressions held the brittle confidence of wolves who had mistaken temporary silence for permission. Veda's smile was thin as wire. Look at this. The king's pet healer eats before mothers with litters. Celeste did not answer. The male leaned in. Tell us, Mercy Healer, which herb do you use for unborn hearts? The one that stops them. Laughter, sharp and ugly. Another female clicked her nails against Celeste's bowl. Careful. She might cry and call his majesty. The old insult landed, the one that had followed her from tribunal to cell to arena. Baby killer. Not spoken directly this time, but there in every curl of the mouth, every deliberate nudge of shoulder and word. Celeste set her bowl down on the wagon rim because her fingers had begun to shake again, this time from rage. Move, Veda said softly. Back to servants' rows where unlucky girls belong. Celeste lifted her chin. No. Veda reached for her sleeve. The temperature seemed to drop without warning. Frost crackled across the packed ground between boots. Brennan stepped into the space between them, not fast, simply present all at once, as if the yard itself had resolved around him. He wore no cloak now, only dark leathers and the iron torque at his throat. Behind him, his wolf shadow rose across the firelight, vast and edged in storm, and a jagged line of ice split outward from his boots, with a sound like snapping glass. No one spoke. Brennan looked first at Veda, then at each face in turn. His voice was low, almost conversational, which made the words more dangerous. Hear my law, witnessed by fire and rank. Celeste Frostborn stands under King's protection by my blood and command. Any insult to her name is an insult to my authority. Any threat against her body is a direct challenge under trial code. You will apologize now, or you will answer me in the circle. The male from the breeding ward went pale and dropped to one knee so quickly he splashed stew over his own boots. No challenge, my king. The second female bowed her head. No challenge. Veda held out longest, jaw rigid, pride fighting survival in plain view. Then she bent, shallow but unmistakable. No challenge. Words, Brennan said. Veda's mouth tightened. I spoke out of turn, Celeste Frostborn. The others echoed, stumbling over her full name as if it were newly minted coin. Brennan did not look at them again. Leave. They scattered, boots scraping, shoulders turned inward. He faced Celeste then, and the feral edge in him softened by degrees. Are you hurt? No. Her voice came rough. Just tired of surviving them. I know. He drew a breath. From this moment you do not eat in open yard. You sleep in the inner guarded wing. She blinked. Your officers will call that favoritism. My officers follow orders. Come with me. He took her untouched bowl, handed it to a passing guard, and escorted her through a side passage to the private kitchens attached to the war wing. The cook straightened as he entered. Brennan requested fresh broth, winter root mash, and pine tea, then stood in the doorway while the tray was prepared, scanning every hand that touched cup or pot. When the tea arrived, he took the cup first and drank a measured swallow. Celeste stared. You think they would poison me here? I think someone already used medicine as a weapon and counted on our habits to finish the work. He drank again, set the cup down, and nodded for her to take it. No draft reaches you untested. Not while this trial stands. She held the warm clay between both palms, watching him over the rim as she sipped where his mouth had been moments before. A small intimacy, almost absurd in the middle of war logistics. And yet, it settled something raw beneath her ribs. Brennan leaned against the table, exhaustion carving deeper lines beside his scars now that the yard confrontation had passed. Power can be used to cage or to shield, he said. I learned that late. My father ruled by fear and called it order. I buried too many wolves before I understood obedience is not loyalty. I will not repeat his house. The confession carried no request for absolution. Just fact. Just terms. Celeste set the cup down carefully. When you called my name in the ring, I thought it was another kind of sentence. And now? She met his eyes, steady for the first time all day. Now I think you mean what you say. Outside, wind hammered the shutters, and somewhere in the lower levels a horn signaled envoy quarters secured. Inside the guarded kitchen, with firelight on stone and storm pressed against the glass, Celeste felt her defenses shift by one deliberate degree. Not surrender, not yet, but the first chosen opening in a wall built to survive winter alone. The first chosen opening did not stay small for long. Another knock cut through the kitchen quiet, sharper than before. Hale stepped in without waiting, snow gone from her braids now, expression set in command mask. Duskwalker requests audience in the North Reception Hall, she said. He asked for you by title, my king, and for Frostborn by name. Brennan's jaw tightened. On what pretext? He says truce custom, shared bread, shared witness, shared intent before final stage. Hale's gaze moved to Celeste. He also sent 6 casks of March medicinal spirits to the infirmary as a gift between territories. Celeste felt the back of her neck go cold despite the fire. Do not open those casks. Hale did not flinch. They are sealed in quarantine by my order. Brennan gave a short nod, approval and warning folded together. Keep them sealed. Post 2 guards who answer only to you. If anyone asks why, tell them I said no vessel is touched until healer command review under Frostborn. Hale left at once. For a breath, neither Celeste nor Brennan moved. The storm rattled the shutter slats hard enough to make the cups tremble on the table. He's forcing visibility, Celeste said quietly. If I refuse, I look guilty. If I attend, he studies me where everyone can report what they see. He wanted both outcomes. Brennan straightened from the table. Come anyway. Because you trust me. Because he expects me to hide you. They crossed the corridor with 4 sentries behind them, boots striking stone in precise rhythm. The North Reception Hall had been built for treaties and betrayals in equal measure. Long fire trenched down the center, carved wolf pillars at each corner, polished obsidian floor reflecting torchlight like dark water. March guards stood along the eastern wall in layered black leather, disciplined, unsmiling. At their center waited Xavier Duskwalker. He was handsome the way polished blades were beautiful. All clean lines and controlled posture, wolf pelt mantle pinned at one shoulder with a silver clasp shaped like a crescent split by a spear. His smile arrived quickly and never reached his eyes. My king, Xavier said, bowing with graceful precision. Winter keeps its legends well. Brennan gave him a nod that did not soften. Alpha Duskwalker. Xavier turned to Celeste with deliberate slowness. And this must be Celeste Frostborn. I had heard the mountain was cruel. I had not heard it was wasteful. The compliment felt like a trap lined in silk. Celeste dipped her head just enough for protocol. Alpha. He gestured to the table laid with bread, salt, and steaming venison. I requested your presence because rumor has been louder than truth. That is always dangerous in a war season. I would rather meet the woman than the story told about her. Brennan answered first. Then you've met her. Speak your business. Xavier's smile widened by a degree. Direct. Good. My March packs offer military aid for your final trial stage, 2 companies of ice trackers, 1 supply train, and temporary oath support under truce law. In return, we observe command protocol and participate in council review after completion, transparent cooperation, northern stability. It sounded generous. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a net. Celeste watched his hands while he spoke. No tremor, no impatience. A thin ring of blackened silver on his right index finger, engraved with a sigil she recognized from old tribunal diagrams. A hooked spiral used by border war priests to mark private oaths outside council law. Not illegal. Not clean. Brennan's voice stayed level. You arrive with aid and casks I did not request. Preparedness, Xavier replied. Your weather reports are not private. Neither are poisonings. A flicker crossed Xavier's face, gone almost instantly. If that is accusation, name target and evidence. If it is caution, we agree. He reached for the salt bowl, took a pinch, and scattered it onto the fire trench where it snapped in small white sparks. I came to prevent fracture, not feed it. There are wolves in your own tears who think prophecy already has its hand around your throat. I can calm that fear, or it can choose a louder language. The room went quieter than silence. This was the crux made plain. He was not bargaining for alliance. He was pricing chaos. Brennan stepped closer, just enough that their shadows touched across obsidian. Try your louder language and I answer in the ring. Xavier inclined his head as if receiving a toast. Perhaps we never need test that. Let us be practical men. He looked to Celeste again. And practical women. Her instincts sharpened to a hard edge. He was reading lines of pressure, not people. Who could be isolated? Who could be baited? Who could be made to carry blame for the next wound? When the audience ended, Xavier withdrew with perfect courtesy, his guards folding around him like a moving wall. Brennan remained in the hall until the doors shut, then turned to Celeste. You saw something. The ring on his hand, she said. War priest sigil, private oath spiral, and he never denied the poisoning directly. He redirected to procedure. Brennan studied her face for a long moment. You read predators well. I survived them. He exhaled, once. Stay beside me through council brief. By the time the last reception torches were trimmed, night had settled heavy over the fortress and the wind had shifted north, dragging colder air down the ridge. In the war room, maps filled with fresh pins spread across the central table. Hale reported supply counts. Scouts reported March riders splitting into smaller groups under escort, exactly within truce terms and still somehow alarming. Brennan listened, questioned, reassigned, never wasting a word. Celeste stood at his left shoulder and annotated infirmary routes in charcoal, marking every point where medicine moved without witness. Their hands brushed once over the same slate. Heat pulsed under her skin, immediate and disorienting. She pulled back too quickly and nearly dropped the chalk. Brennan took it from her, set it down, then met her gaze as officers talked around them. We can pause, he said quietly. If I pause, I think. You are thinking now. She almost smiled despite herself. That is the problem. He waited. Not pressing, not retreating. I am present tense inside this fear, she realized. I am here, not in the tribunal chamber, not on the cell floor, not under Rorik's hand. I am here with a king who asks instead of taking, and my pulse keeps answering him like it knows a language my caution does not. Want is dangerous because it makes future tense promises. Want says maybe. Want says stay. If he breaks, I break wider. If he does not, I have to become someone who can be seen without armor. I do not know that woman yet. I can feel her knocking. Tell me one thing true, Brennan said, voice barely above breath. She looked down at the map lines she had drawn and chose the smallest truth she could carry. When you are near, I stop shaking. His throat moved with a swallow. Then stay near. Hale cleared her throat from the opposite side of the table, professional and pointed. Report from lower stores. Rorik was not at his post when the detachment arrived. Records clerk says he transferred duty to Special Envoy Liaison, signed with a counterfeit seal. Brennan's expression went hard. Find him. We are searching. Another officer stepped forward, younger, rein on his cloak. My king, 2 infirmary runners requested key access to quarantine casks using your name. Denied. They disappeared into the West Passage. One has since returned, claiming misunderstanding. Confine him, Brennan said. No one leaves wing level without escort. Pressure built in the room like ice forming under moving water. Xavier's scheme was no longer abstract. It had hands in corridors, signatures on stolen seals, mouths ready with rehearsed confusion. Celeste moved to the medicine inventory board and traced item columns with her finger. He does not need many people. He needs timing and witnesses. If he can place one tainted draft where rank wolves drink it, accusation writes itself. Brennan looked at her, then at Hale. From this point, all treatment in critical lanes is double-signed by Frostborn and a Stormborn medic. No solo prep. No unlabeled vessels. Hale nodded. Done. 3 hours later, after the 6th corridor sweep and the 2nd failed attempt to access quarantine, the fortress had settled into that brittle midnight stillness that came just before crisis broke. Celeste sat in the guarded dispensary adjacent to the war wing, grinding fever bark while a Stormborn medic logged dosages. Brennan had refused sleep and was reviewing envoy rosters 1 room away. Through the open arch, she could hear his voice every few minutes, low and steady, anchoring the night. A junior server entered with a tray of post-watch tea, eyes down, hands steady. Hale intercepted the tray before it crossed the threshold. Who sent this? Kitchen steward, commander. Hale checked each cup, sniffed, then passed one toward Celeste. Brennan appeared in the arch as if called by instinct, took the cup first and drank. Only after a measured count did he hand it to her. Xavier wants spectacle, Celeste thought. He wants the king seen choosing me over caution, then punished for it. He wants my body to carry his narrative a second time. Not again. Not again. She drank. The first alarm came from the South Infirmary. 2 fighters collapsing after endurance rotation, severe abdominal pain, pulse spikes, uterine spasms in one female combatant who had taken a recovery tonic at lane change. Celeste and Hale reached the ward at a run. The air hit like a wall of heat and fear, cots crowded, medics barking for hot water and restraints. Celeste dropped to the nearest patient, checked pupils, breath, tongue color, then the cup residue still clinging to cracked clay at bedside. Bitterleaf, mint, and beneath it a metallic ash note that made her stomach turn. Moonroot ash compound, she said. Diluted, but active. Start charcoal slurry. Now. A medic hesitated. This tonic was signed from your station. Celeste snapped her head up. Show me the ledger. He shoved it toward her with shaking hands. Her own name was there in careful script she had not written, beside batch number W17, exactly the number she had assigned to harmless Willow Tonic 1 hour earlier. Hale swore under her breath. Forgery. The female fighter on the cot arched with another spasm, crying out through clenched teeth. Celeste took her hand, voice firm. Stay with me. Breathe. You are not dying tonight. Across the ward, another patient vomited black-gray streaks into a basin. Not graphic, just wrong, unmistakably wrong. The room tilted toward panic. Boots thundered in the corridor. Rorik appeared at the door, flanked by 2 council wardens, face composed now, outrage polished for audience. There, he said loudly, pointing at Celeste. I warned command she was carrying unregistered compounds. Now 2 wolves poisoned under royal guard. Hale stepped between him and the cots. You evaded detention order and forged seals. Rorik spread his hands in practiced disbelief. Convenient accusation. Behind him, Xavier Duskwalker entered at a measured pace, with 3 allied alphas in tow, each drawn by the alarm bells now ringing through the fortress. He took in the convulsing patients, the ledger in Celeste's hand, Brennan arriving at her shoulder with storm in his eyes, and his expression turned regretful in a way that was almost art. "This is tragic," Xavier said, voice pitched to Carrie. "Under trial law, contamination in a royal infirmary triggers immediate neutrality hearing. The implicated healer must be bound pending dawn counsel." Brennan's aura slammed outward, command thickening the air. "She is under my protection." Xavier met his stare without blinking. "Then choose quickly, my king. Protect your mate candidate and forfeit impartial command, or surrender her to law and keep your throne clean. The council is already assembling." The bells shifted from alarm to summons, deep and relentless, echoing through stone as wardens advanced with binding chains, and every wolf in the ward turned to see whether Brennan Stormborn would stand beside Celeste or let the law drag her away again. The wardens closed in with binding chains, and the true danger was no longer poison in a cup, but narrative in motion. If they locked Celeste now, Xavier would own the story by dawn. Brennan stepped in front of her, shoulders squared, voice low enough to vibrate in her bones. "No one touches her." Rorik lifted his chin, righteous as carved stone. "Under contamination statute, implicated healers are restrained pending neutral review." "Implicated by a forged ledger," Hale snapped. Xavier did not raise his volume, yet every word carried. "Then submit to process. If she is innocent, process protects her. If not, your refusal condemns you both." The ward was still chaos behind them, medics forcing charcoal slurry between clenched teeth, one fighter groaning through cramps, kettles boiling over open coals. Fear made wolves cruel and procedural at once. A council elder pushed through the doorway with 2 scribes and stared at the writhing cots. "Chain the healer," the elder ordered. "Now." Celeste felt Brennan's control strain like wire. If he fought council authority in a medical ward, he would look exactly like what Xavier had promised, a king made partial by a woman. She touched Brennan's arm. "If you stop them with force, he wins." His gaze cut to hers, storm bright. "If I let them bind you, I fail you." "You do not fail me by listening." Her voice steadied on purpose. "You fail me if you let him pick the ground." The elder signaled again. Wardens advanced. Celeste stepped forward on her own and lifted both hands, palms open. "I invoke healer blood attestation under Moonwell Code." The room stalled. Even Rorik blinked. The elder frowned. "That code is archived." "Not repealed," Celeste said. "If contamination is alleged, the accused healer may petition Moonwell memory binding against the vessel and the original case evidence. Outcome is visible to council and rank witnesses. No private testimony. No altered ledger." Rorik barked a short laugh. "Convenient theater." "Then decline it publicly," she said, turning so the ward door and hall beyond could hear. "Tell every fighter gasping on those cots that you refuse the oldest anti-tamper right we have." The elder hesitated, calculating optics, legacy, precedent. Xavier's expression remained courteous, but something hard flickered at the corner of his mouth. "At first bell past midnight," the elder said at last, "in the central ring. Until then, she remains under guard." "Under my guard," Brennan said. Xavier inclined his head. "Accepted." By the time the 3rd summons bell rolled over the fortress, snow had thickened into a white wall, and every torch in the arena burned twice as high. Celeste stood between Hale and 2 stormborn sentries at the ring's edge, while scribes arranged slates and council seats on the upper tier. The poisoned fighters had stabilized, not recovered. Proof had to happen now. Hale leaned close. Rorik's men tried twice to enter the archive annex. We stopped them. Where is the Luna vial? Moonwell vault. Finally where it should have been. Hale pressed a wrapped bundle into Celeste's gloved hand. Confiscated from a false courier 10 minutes ago. Label scraped, shape matches your description. Celeste unwrapped enough to see the chip near the neck. Same vessel. Same lie. Across the ring, Xavier shrugged off his mantle and handed it to an aide. He looked like a commander preparing for testimony, calm, groomed, almost bored. Brennan stood on the opposite side with no cloak, scars pale against winter-dark skin, aura coiled tight enough that nearby guards held their breath without realizing it. The elder rose and struck his staff once on stone. Moonwell attestation begins. Celeste Frostborn stepped to the basin. The Moonwell basin sat in the ring's center, carved from old black ice that never melted, water luminous under the surface like trapped starlight. Celeste approached with the wrapped vial in one hand and a healer spike in the other. Neutrality code forbade blood rites except in plague or treason claims. She would shatter that silence in front of everyone. I was trained to keep my head down and my mouth sealed, she thought, pulse thundering. I was told obedience is purity. Obedience was the blade they used. Not again. She sliced her palm with the spike, hissed once, and let blood fall into the basin. Silver ripples spread. She lowered the chipped vial until glass touched Moonwell water. Witness me, she said, voice raw and carrying. Memory bind of compound transfer, Luna case evidence, and current contamination batch. For 2 heartbeats, nothing changed. Then black-silver smoke uncoiled from the vial neck, thin as thread and unmistakable. It rose, twisted, and bent across the ring toward the March delegation. Not toward every rider. Toward Xavier's war priest standard, where the hooked spiral sigil burned in cold light above his seat. A collective sound tore through the stands, not a cheer, not outrage, something older and more dangerous, recognition. Rorik shouted, "Forgery by blood magic! She planted this!" Celeste turned, blood still dripping from her hand. Then step into the basin and deny it by oath. Rorik did not move. Xavier's smile vanished. Clever. You weaponized a sacred well with uncontrolled rightcraft. Uncontrolled, Brennan said softly. Still found your mark. The elder stumbled over his next words. This requires... Xavier cut him off. This requires command integrity. Brennan Stormborn is compromised by mate bond influence. Under ancient combat law, I challenge for immediate trial command until full sovereign review. The arena erupted. Some alphas rose, others shouted refusal. March wolves moved first, faster than protocol, chain launchers lifting from beneath cloaks. They fired in a practiced volley. Iron links whipped through snow and wrapped Brennan's torso and left leg, yanking him off balance onto one knee. A second chain locked his sword arm to a ring post. It was not a formal challenge. It was an ambush disguised as legal invocation. Hale drew steel. Stormborn guards surged. The ring tipped toward open battle. "Stand down!" the elder screamed, unheard. Xavier shifted half-form, claws lengthening, eyes gone feral. Yield command, and she lives. Brennan braced against the chain and rose partway anyway, muscles shaking under the torque. Come take it. Celeste did not wait for permission. She stepped into the dual circle, bloodied hand raised. Mate candidate healer trial right, she shouted, projecting from somewhere deeper than fear. I enter as evidentiary claimant. Any strike against me voids challenge legitimacy under council law. Several elders froze. They knew the clause, rarely used, still binding. Xavier snarled. Leave the circle, girl. No. Heat and cold collided under her skin, then became one clear current. She dropped to the chain anchor, pressed her bleeding palm to the iron, and drove her frost gift outward. The arena chains lit with white-silver fracture lines, ice racing link by link in branching patterns until every restraint around Brennan flashed rigid and brittle. Xavier launched toward her in a full lunge, shift breaking further, fangs bared. Celeste ripped the frozen anchor free and swung the chain low. It cracked against Xavier's forearm, checking his momentum. Brennan tore one arm loose as the iced link shattered. "Now!" Hale roared. Stormborn wolves slammed into March flank guards, disarming rather than killing, boots skidding on glazed stone. The clash stayed brutal, but controlled, a war fought on the edge of law. Xavier recovered and came for Celeste again, faster, rage burning away pretense. She sidestepped at the last instant, saw the old scar beneath his collarbone open with the stretch of his strike, and drove her silvered healer spike into that seam with both hands. He choked on the sound that left him. His right arm dropped useless at once, dominant nerve line severed clean. Brennan hit him a heartbeat later, shoulder to chest, taking him down hard onto the ice. He pinned Xavier at throat level with forearm and torque pressure, not enough to crush, enough to end the fight. Xavier spat blood-tinged saliva onto the stone between them and turned his head toward Celeste, hatred bright and naked. "He will fall because of you." Celeste planted her heel on Xavier's wrist when he twitched for one last bite and met his eyes without flinching. "No. He stands because I refuse to kneel." Brennan's voice cut through the storm and the shouting tears. "By trial law, witnessed by counsel and blood attestation, I strip Xavier Duskwalker of alpha rights for treachery under truce, medical sabotage, and unlawful assault in Challenge Circle." He twisted the challenge torque from Xavier's neck and threw it to the Elder's feet. "Record it." The Elder swallowed, then nodded to his scribe with shaking urgency. "Recorded." Rorik tried to bolt through the west gate. Hale's blade met his throat before he reached the arch. "Captain Rorik," she said, breathing hard, "you are under arrest for evidence tampering, attempted framing, and conspiracy in Royal Infirmary attack." Rorik looked to Xavier for rescue and found none. March guards were on their knees, wrists bound in their own chain links. Stormborn sentries dragged Xavier upright, alive, staggering, one arm hanging dead weight. The Elder forced his voice steady. "Sentence under border treason statute, exile beyond the obsidian line, rank marks removed before witness." No one objected. Not one wolf in the council tears. As wardens hauled Xavier toward the gate, he craned back once, face gray with pain and fury. "You think this ends with one ring and one basin. Prophecy still has teeth." Brennan did not answer him. Celeste did. "Then it can choke on us." The gate slammed behind the exiled party with a sound like a mountain door closing. Snow blew through the briefly open arch and erased their tracks almost immediately. In the sudden quiet, Brennan turned to Celeste, chain bruises darkening across his ribs, breath ragged, eyes still lit with that molten edge that had first found her in the ring. He reached for her injured hand and held it carefully above his heart while the entire court watched. This time, when wolves bowed, they bowed to both of them. Brennan did not let go of her hand when the last of the kneeling wolves straightened. He held her gaze, chest still heaving from the fight, then turned to Hale. "Secure the ring, seal the ledgers, and escort the Elder to Moonwell Record with full guard. The chipped vial, the forged batch slate, the quarantine casks, and Duskwalker's oath ring go under triple witness tonight." Hale struck her fist to her heart. "Already in motion, my king. Rorik is chained in the lower vault. He keeps asking who betrayed him." "No one betrayed him," Celeste said, voice hoarse. "Truth arrived." Hale's scarred face softened for one brief beat. "I will have a full confession before dawn." Brennan nodded once and drew Celeste with him through the inner gate, away from the roar of the arena, up the narrow path that climbed behind the fortress to the old stone circle where trials began and kings were sworn. Snow still fell, gentler now, catching moonlight in drifting sheets. The wind smelled clean at last, as if the mountain had exhaled. At the center of the circle, Brennan stopped beside the tallest standing stone, its surface etched with pale runes worn smooth by generations of hands. He took off his gloves and tucked them into her belt without speaking, practical even now. Then he dropped to one knee in the snow, not from weakness, from intention, and bared the side of his throat where pulse beat strong. Celeste stared down at him, breath unsteady. "I will ask clearly," he said, rough with restraint. "Celeste Frostborn, do you consent to a bond mark from me?" She heard the bells below, distant and fading. She heard her own pulse. Yes. He did not move. "Do you consent with no pressure of rank, law, or debt?" Yes. His eyes searched hers, amber deepening, predator and man aligned. "Do you choose me?" A wall she had lived inside for months began to crumble, stone by stone. "I choose you." Only then did he rise. He touched her cheek first, giving her time to turn away if she needed. She did not. His thumb brushed the line of her jaw, then traced to the junction of neck and shoulder where skin was warm despite the cold. He breathed her in once, as if memorizing. "Mine," he whispered, not as ownership, as reverence. He bit. Pain came sharp and bright, a clean strike that made her gasp and grip his shoulders hard enough to feel the chain bruises beneath leather. Then the pain changed. Heat spread from the mark in widening rings, fierce and liquid, racing through her chest, down her arms, into her palms. Gold threads flared under both their skin, visible in the moonlight like molten filigree, then sank deeper, weaving through scars, fear, hunger, all the places she had gone numb. She felt his grief like a storm front held too long, his discipline like iron set in fire, his care for his wolves, for his territory, for her. Not separate currents, but one vast field, opening and opening. He lifted his mouth from her shoulder and pressed his forehead to hers, breathing hard. "Yours," he said. Celeste cupped his jaw. Again. His eyes widened slightly. "I am not being carried into this," she said. "I am stepping." She turned him, gentle but certain, and placed her mouth over the pulse in his throat where he had offered vulnerability first. Her fangs lengthened with no shame left in the motion. She bit, deliberate, deep enough to seal, not to harm. His hands clenched at her waist, a low sound breaking from him that was almost a growl and almost prayer. Power surged between them in a single clean arc, his scars lit like runes, bright gold for one trembling heartbeat before settling to warm bronze. "Mate," he breathed against her hair. The word landed in her like home. They stood wrapped in each other and in the new bond's steady hum, not frantic, not consuming, settled. She could feel where he ended and where she began, and also the bridge between, resilient and living. His heartbeat matched hers after a few breaths, then held. "No more nameless winters," he murmured at her temple. She smiled into his throat, tears freezing at the edge of her lashes before they could fall. "No more standing alone." He drew back just enough to look at her mark, then his own, awe and protectiveness crossing his face in unguarded succession. "You are bleeding." "So are you." He almost laughed, a brief, incredulous sound that broke the last of the night's tension. He tugged her closer under his cloak anyway, both of them marked, both shivering, both unwilling to step apart. By dawn, the great court was full. Torches blazed along the carved beams. Wolves packed every tier, from senior alphas to kitchen hands, all waiting as the council elder stood before the law stone with two scribes and read the findings into record. Celeste stood beside Brennan on the central dais, her shoulder bandaged in white linen that did nothing to hide the fresh claim mark. Brennan wore his formal toque. She wore a fur-lined mantle in storm-born colors that Hale had fastened with military precision, and a quiet, approving nod. The elder's voice shook once, then steadied. Moonwell attestation confirmed deliberate evidence substitution in the High Luna miscarriage case. Original tonic was replaced with moonroot ash compound. Responsibility traced to conspiracy led by Xavier Duskwalker with local collaborators including Captain Rorik. Celeste Frostborn is fully exonerated. The court erupted, then stilled when the elder raised his staff. Further decree, he continued, forced healer silence is abolished. Any healer may report suspected tampering directly to Moonwell Tribunal without penalty of rank obstruction. Violations carry treason weight. A murmur moved through the healer ranks like wind through pines, disbelief turning to relief in real time. Hale stepped forward with a sealed iron box and opened it on a witness table. The chipped vial tagged and archived, the forged ledger beside the true one, Xavier's hooked spiral ring, and samples drawn from all 6 March casks. A tribunal medic announced what the assay had shown. 3 casks clean, 3 laced in staggered doses to produce plausible deniability. The distinctive ash metal scent Celeste had flagged was now documented in law. Rorik confessed before first light, Hale added, voice carrying. He named the cloaked man from lower stores as March Warpriest courier Taven Greycloak. Taven was caught at the West Breach with counterfeit seals and is bound for border sentence with Duskwalker's remaining conspirators. No thread left loose, no evidence unaccounted. From the lower tier, Veda stepped into the witness lane when called. Pride warred with shame across her face, but she bowed deeply to Celeste. I spread slander. I was wrong. Her voice shook. I ask sanction and chance to repair. Celeste met her eyes. You will serve 1 winter at the new healing hall under healer code. You will carry water, scrub instruments, and learn what names can do. Veda swallowed and nodded. Accepted. Then Brennan took the circlet from the elder's hands, silver dark and set with a single winter opal, and turned to Celeste so the entire court could see his face. Celeste Frostborn, he said, every word clear as struck steel. By sovereign right and witness of council, I name you Winter Luna and Master Healer of the United Northern Territories, with independent authority over tribunal medicine and sanctuary law. He set the circlet on her head. Wolves knelt, all of them. Celeste looked out over bowed heads, over fighters she had stitched, servants who once looked away, officers who had tested her and now stood guard at her back. The bond at her shoulder pulsed, warm and grounded. She lifted her chin and spoke into the hush. Open the border hall. That afternoon, in the old granary at the Obsidian Road, she stood with Brennan, Hale, and 12 newly sworn apprentices, including 2 orphaned youths from storm-broken outposts who watched her hands with fierce concentration as she unpacked sterilized kits. Carpenters raised the first beam while rival pack envoys pressed seals into a non-aggression pact drafted from Xavier's exposed conspiracy. Medicine would cross borders under neutral guard. Sanctuary cots would not be searched for politics. Every clause was read aloud before signatures were taken. When the final seal cooled, Brennan threaded his fingers through hers in plain sight, marked skin against marked skin. At sunset they returned to the great court. Wolves bowed again, not from fear, from allegiance freely given. Celeste and Brennan stood hand in hand beneath the winter banners, mated, crowned, and unafraid, because fate had tried to make her nameless, and instead had spoken her name into law.